class as we continue in the laws of Tefillah, learning about proper conduct during our prayers. We are continuing in Orach Chaim, Tzadi Tes 99. We have a bit of ground to cover. Things are kind of short today, meaning the Simanim, the individual chapters are short, not that the Torah is short. The Torah lives on and is quite extensive and can take up an enormous amount of time to learn all of it. With that being said, let us get ready to learn about Mishnah Berurah. And I've been advised that it makes sense to remind all of our viewers to like, subscribe, and make sure to ring the bell so you get notified when the classes pop up. And share it with your friends as well. Anyway, enough of the SEO stuff. Let's move on to the actual halachas over here. So what do we do for people who are drinking wine and have had something to drink and want to pray, right? Someone who has had a drink and someone who has had too much to drink. That's what we're dealing with 99 today. So if you drink 1 revius of wine, which is, we calculate that to be a little more than 4 ounces, thou shalt not pray until the wine passes, okay? And if you drink more than that, if you are able to speak before a king, then if you pray, your prayer is okay. So it's basically say you shouldn't pray. If you drank more than that and you prayed, okay. All right? And if you are not able to speak, and we bless during the Pesach Seder after drinking wine. Right, but that's different. It's different. Reading the Haggadah is different than prayer. Prayer requires us to have significantly more concentration. And we'll see it today a little bit about what exactly it means to have more concentration. But that's the difference over here, is that, yes, you are correct, that we drink more than a revius for the Pesach Seder. But it requires less of our concentration. That's a very good point. I never even thought about that. Definitely requires less concentration. Actually, you could also make the point too, but certainly Shemona Esrei is the only thing that's excluded. If you drink a little bit, we're not excluding necessarily doing other things. But let's one thing at a time. If you cannot speak before the king, then your prayer is considered an abomination. I wish it would say rejected, but it's considered abominable. Okay, and you must pray again when your wine has passed. Okay, whenever your tipsiness has passed. Even if that means losing out on the time of prayer, you should fill up. You should refill it, meaning if you miss the time of prayer later on, like someone who erroneously missed the time of prayer. Okay, and the Ramah says that the laws of Kriya Shema is like Tefillah, but all other blessings one can make, even though they are drunk. Okay, so that answers your question a little bit about the Haggadah. The Mishnah Berurah says the following. Okay, so you drink wine. Well, that law applies to all other types of alcoholic beverages, okay? And he says that this is brought later on in a Taz, okay? When it comes to, for example, raising the hands for blessing the congregation as a Kohen, Nesias Kapayim. Okay, so even people who are a little bit lenient about that, they are still going to be more strict when it comes to prayer. And therefore, all those other drinks are going to be a problem. Okay? So everyone seems to say that it's the problem. If the issue is going to be drinking a revius. Okay? So the Mishnah Berurah is satisfied with saying that you need to have any type of other alcoholic beverage that's equivalent to a revius of wine. So whatever that amount of alcohol would be in that amount of wine. Like 4 ounces of wine, okay? So maybe like a half a shot of whiskey or a shot of whiskey, okay? And until it passes. So it doesn't have, as long as you're drinking enough time before prayer, it won't matter. Okay, so it has to be a revius, we said, and the Mishnah Berurah says you have to drink it all at one time. But if you take two separate sips, that equal the revius, right? Or you mix in some water to reduce the alcohol content, then it's okay to pray. And if you drink more than this revius, okay, then you can't go pray until the alcohol feeling passes you, that little buzz that you get. And these are all discussed later on in Kuf Chaf Ches, Lamed Ches, again by Nisias Kapayim, by blessing the congregation, by Kohanim blessing the congregation. And also, the other condition is that you have to be able to speak before the king, because otherwise it doesn't matter. Okay, there's no difference. Okay, so one difference is that this is also talking about only drinking wine by itself. But if you're having a meal and drinking wine with the meal, that doesn't count. Okay. But some people say no, it's not that simple. It's as complicated as however you feel after drinking. So you shouldn't pray when you're drunk, and we say, just like we say here, that even if you're going to miss the time for prayer. So some people are lenient. They quote, the Mishnah Berurah quotes the opinion of the Maharshal, that basically says that you shouldn't be so strict, but you should wait till at least you have enough time that you can kind of somewhat focus during your prayers. Okay, and which means the Shulchan Aruch says until the wine passes, and even if you drink a lot and you never get drunk, okay, even if it's just a little bit, nonetheless, you shouldn't pray immediately if you had a drop of wine. So you have to give it some time. So we say the prayer is considered abominable. And the Mishnah Berurah goes further by saying it's as if you've worshipped idols. And, if you don't pray when you're drunk, you are actually rewarded for that. Okay, and waiting for the wine to pass, we say someone is considered erroneously missing a prayer service. And that's even if you started drinking when you weren't supposed to, like the time for Mincha came along, or time for Mariv came along. Okay, you think you have lots of time until you pray, and you have to wait a long time until the wine passes. Okay? So that's what you need to do. However, if the service goes on and you're forgetting about prayer and you're a little bit drunk, until that you really aren't going to have enough time to wait for that little drunken, buzzy feeling to pass, well, you're considered having erred and missing the time for prayer. So if it's close to Mincha time, and you're going to miss the end of it, and you for sure, are getting drunk in that time period, that's considered a little bit closer to being intentional. Okay, and then you can't make it up. So that's a little bit different. So the Ramah adds that for Kriya Shema, the same rule applies, and that applies to the blessings of the Shema as well. So that whole prayer. So basically, don't pray. It's so funny sometimes they add this stuff in afterwards. Okay. Let's see. Is a regular Israelite's time to wait before prayer after wine? Come back. Less strict than for the Levi Kohen, or the same amount of time in imitation of their statutes. So this sounds like the time is the same. I don't recall there being any difference. So they would have to wait until the wine basically passes. Okay, so the Ramah compares the two, compares Kriya Shema and Tefillah. So that means that anyone who has any drinks shouldn't go ahead and recite the Shema. And some people actually are lenient against this opinion of the Ramah and say that the little bit to drink, you can still recite the Shema. Okay. And some people say that's even if you're a little bit drunk, because prayer requires you to actually ask for things that you need, and you need a little more focus. Okay, so the Gra, however, actually explains this opinion a little bit more in detail. So he says that the actual citation of the Ramah is pretty strong, and that a person who is drunk should not recite the Kriya Shema either. Therefore, a person should be wary from doing such a thing. However, if you went ahead, even if you got drunk, you should probably recite the Shema, especially if the time is going to pass. And this is actually stated later on by when it comes to reciting Birkas Hamazon. You haven't eaten in a while and you need to bench, and you're gonna lose out on reciting Birkas Hamazon. You should go ahead and say it. Okay. So, and then the Ramah is lenient by all other blessings. So this is also including Birkas Hamazon. Okay. So therefore, what we're saying is that you can be a little bit lenient, but he'll go into more detail in those rules later on in 185. Something you can't do is you can't be included in the minyan. Okay, and but for Zimon, for having people say the Rabotai Nevarech before the end of the meal, that would be okay. And so he ends with that you are drunk. Okay, now the Gross says that you should actually be strict in all these things against the Ramah. Okay, especially if you're unable to speak intelligently before the king, even with any other blessings. Okay, as long as you don't get so drunk that you can't tell the difference between what's a good idea, what's a bad idea, right? You have lost basically all rational thought. And a person who can't do that is actually considered to have gone crazy, and that person is considered exempt from all types of things, even other mitzvahs. Don't put on your tefillin, don't do anything, right? Nothing. And so that person is not doing a mitzvah in such a case. So if you're super drunk and you can't tell the difference between what's right and what's wrong, having that tough a time, just call it a day and don't do anything. Okay. Now, here's how you got to get rid of the wine. This is in Halacha Beis, number 2. He says, if you walk about a meal, which is about an 18 to 24 minute walk, and you sleep a little bit, okay, that kind of helps to dilute the wine feeling. And this is when you drank the revius of wine. But if you drank more than that, so you have to have more sleep to get rid of that drunkenness, and also more of a walk to kind of remove that feeling. Okay, and that's assuming you're walking on your feet. However, riding or driving, that does help to reduce it a little bit. Okay. So the Mishnah Berurah explains that when you walk a mile, the meal, right, the 18 to 24 minute walk, this is whether you're walking or riding, and some people that need further to ride, you need actually 3 times the amount, and that's sort of your drunkenness. The sleep gets out of your drunkenness. A little bit of sleep does, but a lot of sleep really gets rid of it. Okay, then we say about riding. All right, it's not as big a deal. So a drunken horse ride home is not good enough. No, a drunken horse ride home is good enough, assuming you're the drunk and not the horse being drunk. I forget where I saw that joke. But yes, it's like that. And the Mishnah Berurah explains that the horse ride has to be 3 times as long. However, you have to actually look and see how drunk they are and how much they actually need. Okay, so everyone who has had wine to drink, this is Halacha Gimel. You have to look at yourself and see how long it actually takes to get rid of all that drunken feeling. And the Ramah says, and therefore, we are not worried about our wines, which aren't so strong. So we go ahead and pray, even though we've had a little bit to drink, and maybe even a little bit more to drink. And how much more so if you are reciting your prayers from inside of a siddur, that we're not worried about a little bit of drunkenness. Okay, so the biggest concern is you're going to ruin the words. So let's look at the Mishnah Berurah. Okay, so he explains the Ramah. He says, so this is someone who has had something to drink of only where you should not be davening, but not that you're prohibited from davening. However, a person who rises to the level of making their prayer abominable should not. So if you're super drunk, that doesn't count, even if you're using this permission. So we're not as concerned when you just have a little bit to drink. Okay, and he's saying this just to explain why people are not so particular about this. But really, the truth is that you shouldn't do it. And the Mishnah Berurah says it's the name of the Prima Gana. And so, as promised, the Yam Shel Shlomo says that, this is the Marshal, that you can go ahead and pray mincha even if you've had quite a bit to drink, because you can't just wait until the wine just passes, and especially now that people aren't really paying that much attention, they shouldn't be so particular about it. So as long as you feel like you can recite all the words and understand them, that works just fine. All right, that's the end of Siman Tzadi Tes. Now we're in Kuf, we're in chapter 100. Okay, so when we get to where the law over here is that one has to prepare the Tefillah, the Shemona Esrei, before every holiday. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the halacha explains. So the prayers of the holidays and for the prayers of the beginning of the month, Rosh Chodesh, you must organize them before you actually pray, so that way they are fluent in your mouth. The Rama adds, that's when you're only praying orally and you're recalling it by, what they call it, Baal Peh. You're reciting it by heart. But if you're using a Siddur, that's fine, because you see what you need to say. And that's the custom. So Mishnah Berurah explains, Rosh Chodesh, okay? So there is a dispute about what this actually should say. So the Gra that says that it's referring to Musaf, and the reason why is because we don't say the Rosh Chodesh Musaf very frequently, but just once a month. So people aren't confident to say it. And also, some people say that it also means that you should also practice Ya'aleh v'Yavo during Shacharis, okay, the little section you add for the holiday of Rosh Chodesh. So you should practice saying that ahead of time. And so too, on Hanukkah, you should practice saying the Al Hanisim for that, and the Purim, that one as well. All right, you need to practice all of these things, or use a Siddur. Okay, and some people just go ahead and just recite it by heart without doing that, and that's inappropriate to do, and they make tons of mistakes. Okay, and therefore, a person should certainly 100% prepare themselves to pray for Hanukkah and Purim and other holidays and festivities, so that way they have seen it first before praying. And we say the prayer when the prayer is being done Baal Peh, right? So some people say that people go ahead and recite Birka, the blessing of the new month, without having looked at it in the Siddur. And he says to see the Shari Tshuva. There's a lot of places like this. If it's not so common for you to say it, you should practice it first. All right, so that you should practice it. So therefore, have a Siddur around. The Mishnah Berurah is explaining. Especially when there are certain prayers and poems that are very difficult to understand, you need to prepare them ahead of time, and you also reading them from the book right now doesn't count. So here's a source to basically say that I always give a class every year before Slichos of Rosh Hashanah to basically say you should read the Slichos ahead of time because they're very complicated and very interesting. But the truth is that now a lot of days, since there's a short commentary in the middle of it, you can often rely on that as well. I'd also point out one other important halakha over here, which is very important to know, that people sometimes get asked to daven and they're not very good at the prayers. Okay, so they need to be people get asked to daven, and if they don't know what they're saying, they should prepare it ahead of time. All right. 101. Okay, we're down in prayer 101. Tefillah 101. You must pay attention to all the blessings, that way you know what to say in every language, and that you can also pray in any language. Okay, so the first halacha here is one who prays should pay attention to all the blessings, and if you don't know how to focus on them, you should at the very least pay the most attention to the first three, known as the avos, because if you don't pay attention to those, even if you paid attention to the rest, you still have to repeat the prayers. The Ramah then says, nowadays, we don't make anybody ever repeat it because of not paying attention, because then again, if you repeat it again, you're going to screw it up again, so why even bother? He quotes that in the name of the tour. It's funny how people have looked at prayer over the past few centuries. So the Mishnah Berurah explains, so one who gets up to pray, that a person should be very should be very focused on understanding the end of every single blessing. Okay, that's the most important part of it. So what do we mean by focusing on it? The Mishnah Berurah explains the translation of the words. Okay, what they mean, at least what they mean to you. So therefore, that there should be a person who is in charge of teaching people the explanation of what the words mean of every single prayer. And especially for the first three blessings, and also the blessing of Modim, the blessing of thanks, which is part of the last three. There's also a person should know what that means as well. Okay, why are we so particular about the blessings focusing on our forefathers? Because this is where we organize the prayers that praise the Holy One, blessed be He, the Omnipresent. And it's really inappropriate that these should be like this. You should be distracted while saying these things. It's like going on a date and not paying attention. He doesn't say that. I'm saying that. It's like going into a meeting and not paying attention. It's like going to a Zoom meeting and turning off your screen so you can, not focus. I know I'm guilty of that too, but that's what we're talking about. Okay, so if you know that you can definitely pay attention in those first three blessings, you can pray, and if you know you can't, you shouldn't pray until you basically focus yourself. And we said that in a previous chapter, about chapter 96. And nowadays, so basically, even though the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Chai Adam, who basically says that yes, you really should pray again, but because you're going to just screw it up again, and you're going to say more blessings that'll be blessings of Akala, that's no good. So that's something to really consider. But if you realize you did the terrible job paying attention to the blessing before you say the Hashem's name, you can start that blessing over again from wherever is appropriate. Halacha Beis, number 2 over here. A person shouldn't just pray silently inside their heart. They have to actually pronounce the words with their lips and hear it slightly to the ears, okay, quietly. And they shouldn't make it so loud that other people hear their voice. And if they can't do it so quietly, then they can raise their voice a little bit. But that is when they are praying by themselves. But in the community or in the shul, that's prohibited because you might ruin other people's concentration. The Ramah then says, if you make your voice so loud in your house that when you pray, that the other children can hear you, that's permitted. Okay, so you could daven Shemona Esrei super loud at home for that. Okay, so here's how we know to not be obnoxious at shul. Okay, making it loud enough for other people to hear. So there are those who say, the Mishnah Berurah explains, that you need to be careful about what the Zohar says for the entire time, that you should not make it audible to your ears. But the Magen Avraham disagrees with that, and that Zohar is incorrect. And people who want to say that the Zohar is saying that are incorrect, and the Vilna Gaon agrees with that as well. And many people say that even though there are people who want to quote the Zohar to not make it audible to your ears, they are wrong. However, if you said it with your lips, but didn't make it audible to your ears, you still fulfill the obligation. And don't make it so audible that other people can hear. Because it says by Tefillah Chana, when Chana gives her prayer before when Ellie thinks she's drunk, he only saw her lips flapping, but not her the voice flapping. He saw her lips moving, but not her voice. Didn't hear her voice being produced. And he says, and then we also say that people who make their sound very loud are considered people who are not actually such faithful people to prayer, because it's as if that they don't believe that Hashem can hear their voice unless they scream it out. And everyone who yells out their prayers during prayer are considered part of the false prophets, because that was how false prophets behaved, was to scream and carry on as big as possible. That was actually the Haftorah we read this past week, Haftorah of Kitisa, was that one where the prophets of Baal carried on incessantly. Okay, so therefore one should pray quietly in such a way where that the person next to him shouldn't be able to hear him, or at least couldn't hear him say the words, but he knows he could hear like you're breathing and you're praying. It's super quiet in there. However, if you need to make it a little bit louder so you can focus, you should try to not disturb your friend. Okay. So making your voice heard, and that's even in Psukei Zimra, that's obnoxious. Okay. If you hear people who are obnoxious during Psukei Zimra, I've done sometimes. If people are obnoxious and ignore these things, You can go ahead and raise your own voice so you can hear yourself. And I've actually, in some occasions, I've actually shushed people, and I don't even shush them. I walk up to them with this section of Shulchan Aruch and this Mishnah Berurah and just point to it. And so mark your pages. This is Tefillah 101. Okay, it should be quiet. So the Taz says over here that if you can focus yourself while being quiet, but not so much that it's an actual voice, so that you can't hear the voice, that's not considered enough paying attention. But that is, something where you try to do that by yourself. Okay, and but the idea is that you should really make sure you're always praying with the tzibur. You shouldn't be taking this leniency to pray by yourself. Okay. So you shouldn't make your voice so loud. Again, so the idea is to make your voice audible. That's not appropriate to do in congregation. Number 3. Okay, some people say that in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it's permitted to make yourself loud, even in the community. And the Ramah says, and that's our custom. And nonetheless, you should be careful to not be so loud that it's obnoxious. Okay, and so the Mishnah Berurah explains even within the community, and the reason why is to be even more prepared to receive it, and when you're not actually disrupting the community this way, because everyone is holding mach zorim, and so therefore you can do that. However, our custom is to still be more quiet. Okay, and there is a level that's considered obnoxious. The Ramah says, again, the same thing we said before: modesty in all things. Exactly, right. Being humble. Okay, so the same rule would apply. You're like a false prophet, and especially if you're going to confuse or ignore or make it obnoxious and disturb people. Now, the people who are actually leading the service is the chazan, the shliach tzibur. They can do that in order to help focus everybody's kavana and to make sure people hear a very nice tune. That's okay. That's what the shliach tzibur is supposed to do. Okay, and that's when they're reading out publicly. That's when they're doing the chazar shashatz. Okay. But if people are trying to show how great their voice is, such things, that's obnoxious. You shouldn't do that. Okay, last halacha over here. Maybe we'll come back to it. Okay, I mean, it's really quick. All right, so a person can go ahead and pray in whatever language they understand, and that's when they are praying in the community. But when you're by yourself, you should only pray in Hebrew. That's the first opinion. The second opinion is that this was only said when it came to asking for things you need, like you're praying for a sick person or any other thing that's bothering you in your life, okay, or anything that's bothering you in your house. But the actual Shemona Esrei that people say in the community, even a single person can say it in every language. And some people also say that a person praying by themselves, when they're asking for things from Hashem, they can ask in any language that they want to. Except they cannot use Aramaic. Okay, so we say in any language, and the Mishnah Berurah adds that it's preferable to say it in any language that works for you, because even though it's preferable to say it in Hebrew, and we learned that earlier in Siman Samach Beis 62. Okay, and so there's a Chassam Sofer over here who goes into a large number of proofs that say that you are allowed to pray in any language, and that would only be done temporarily. However, to do it permanently is not appropriate, and especially if they're going to make a person who's going to lead the congregation, and to not use Lashon HaKodesh would be inappropriate. Okay, this is super inappropriate. Okay, and that also, don't forget this. I'm meta Gemara now. This is also written in the early days of Reformation, where they wanted to make all the prayers in German. Okay, and therefore all the prayers should be left in Hebrew in the congregation, but privately you can say it in any language. Okay, and some people say that and the Mishnah Berurah goes on that this is part of the Reformation, and it's a terrible thing to do, and it's you should always make sure to keep the language of Hebrew going on. Okay, so any language that you prefer. Okay, as long as you understand what you're saying. So don't say prayers in Russian if you don't speak Russian. Okay, there is a preference to asking to saying the regular prayers in Hebrew, because the prayers go directly to Hashem, and the and also to the associated angels, unlike with Aramaic and any other language. Okay. However, that's why you want to in the congregation you want to say it in Hebrew. Especially with praying for a sick person, we say. So this is when you're not standing in front of them. But when you're in front of them, you want to say whatever you want to, because it's considered like Hashem's presence is over the sick person. And so some people say, according to this last opinion, that it's permitted even to say Aramaic in public, and we see that, for example, in Kaddish. So that's when we say things like Yakum Furkan and Barich Shemay, which are all in Aramaic. Okay, and therefore, if you are praying at home and you don't, you're not allowed to say Yakum Furkan at home, because just like we said earlier, we follow the opinion that you should only say certain prayers when they are either in Hebrew or they're for a particular individual. Okay? All right. That was a lot to get through today. Probably overstayed our class by a couple of minutes, but thank you for sticking with us today. And we'll continue next week about not walking in front of the person praying. Thank you for joining. And if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, enjoy the weather. It's very nice out there.